There's a lot of tough people in mixed martial arts, you know, fighting people. It's definitely not for everyone. But even then, there's those guys that have stood out above the rest as people just would not go away. Tough SOBs who, yeah, might get outpointed, but you just can't finish them. Now, eventually, if you fight long enough, no matter how tough you are, chances are someone will find a way to stop you. But when it happens, it's usually incredible, seeing those insanely tough fighters get finished for the first time. Well, I'm Balian from MMA On Point. Alright guys, let's take a quick break for a second and talk about today's sponsor, BetterHelp, providing you with an easy way to access licensed therapists to get unbiased advice no matter where you are. Look, life can throw some absolute haymakers at us sometimes, you know, you could feel like you're in deep water just trying to make it to the end of the round. What I'm saying is we all go through different challenges in life, whether that's at work, at home, with family and friends. With all that being said, there's nothing wrong with having a few tools to help you tackle those difficult situations. So consider talking to someone, and BetterHelp can give you that outlet. You can talk to someone that's not only trained and licensed. The main benefit is you're going to talk to someone that is properly equipped to help you handle your challenges in life. If this sounds like something that you could benefit from, all you got to do is go to their website, betterhelp.com/MMA on point. You'll answer a few questions and then BetterHelp will match you with a qualified professional. You'll be matched with a therapist usually within 48 hours, so you'll be able to get started straight away. You can do it all from your phone, your computer, via live messaging or video calls. However you feel most comfortable and whatever is easiest for you, BetterHelp are there to make it happen. Let BetterHelp connect you with a therapist who can help support you all from the comfort of your own home. So if it sounds like something you're interested in, guys, all you got to do is go to betterhelp.com/MMA on point or choose MMA on Point during sign up and get a very special discount for your first month as well. Thank you as always to you Hall of Famers out there. We appreciate all support you guys give the channel, and these are 10 times unfinishable fighters were finally stopped. Number 10, Benoit Saint Denis versus Dustin Poirier.
I'm here to become a dominant force in this division, and I'm working hard for it.
If you hadn't seen too much of Benoit Saint Denis' fights before UFC 299, he's pretty much only ever had one game plan. That's walk forward, throw punches, and try and take you down and bring his pretty decent grappling game into play. Before he got to the UFC, he was marching through people in the likes of Brave Combat Federation, where he walked through some big shots with a seemingly uncrackable chin.
A couple of times, 2-3 times, and now he's gotten hit. There it is.
That's a dangerous ground game too. BJJ purple belt, and as we've alluded to, oh, beautiful shot from Kiwi. Oh, and reply from Sodomi.
And even got out of several scary submission attempts, all while being an unstoppable marauder and getting covered in the raspberry jam on several occasions. He'd already proved he was a tough old bastard by the time he got to the UFC, where he had perhaps, well, one of the worst debuts of all time. I mean, some people get finished immediately, that's pretty bad. BSD, though, took an absolutely hellacious beating. It looked like on several occasions he was going to get knocked out. He ate 150 significant strikes in 15 minutes, but somehow the ref didn't stop it, and somehow he survived. If he wasn't going to get finished in that fight, it honestly looked like nothing was ever going to finish him.
Oh, stop the fight! Stop the fight!
He went to war with the rest of the lightweight division after that and stood and traded with everyone. I won't run through every UFC opponent, but the game plan always stayed the same, walk forward, and he definitely walked into a lot of punches, but never slowed down and never stopped pressuring. That was until he ran into Dustin Poirier, an accurate knockout artist with nearly 30 UFC fights under his belt. Benoit Saint Denis went into the fight as the favourite, and he came forward with the same pressure, swinging, trying to take Dustin's head off. But Poirier battled through the fire, and he was the one to put BSD out for the first time. So after basically a career of just juggernauting people, he finally ran into something he couldn't knock over. I guess that's why they call him the Diamond. Number 9, Kelvin Gastelum versus Chris Weidman. When the young, fresh-faced Kelvin Gastelum came on our screens during The Ultimate Fighter, you know, he had a lot of things going for him, but I don't think many of us were aware just quite how much of a tank this man was going to turn into.
I'm kind of tired of hearing, like, the Uriah Hall hype train, but I don't know. I hope he does well, but, you know, I have plans for myself.
I mean, we saw him take some big shots from Uriah Hall in the finale, and he still came out on top.
And now Gastelum's in trouble. Yeah, he's hurt there, John.
And against Rick Story, I mean, he got tagged with some big left hands and still didn't get knocked out. And then Tyron Woodley, he was knocking everyone out with that right hand he hit Gastelum with the perfect shot, and he still stayed standing. And it wasn't just that he had a good chin on him either, he was very good on the ground, very hard to pin down. I mean, he survived 6 submission attempts from Neil Magny, and just maybe Chris Weidman saw that and thought that was the game plan going into their fight. Chris was on a 3-fight losing streak at this point, and it was a grueling 3-round contest, but finally Chris took down Gastelum and locked in an arm triangle. Kelvin looked completely done despite surviving so much punishment throughout his career. He finally tapped, and what was the first time he'd ever been finished in MMA. Even now, he's still never been knocked out, and he's had many more wars since then. Number 8, Anthony Pettis versus Max Holloway. Showtime came out of the gate running with his MMA career. He went through the WEC finishing a bunch of guys and claimed that belt. And then when he got to the UFC, he had a slight stall, but then went straight for the title and finished a bunch of guys on the way as well. Now at this point we knew just how good of a knockout artist Anthony clearly was, but well, it wasn't until he started losing that we saw just how tough he was as well. He was out-grappled and mauled by Rafael dos Anjos and Eddie Alvarez, but in both fights he refused to go away, and then he went toe-to-toe with Edson Barbosa and he ate a bunch of punishing hooks and kicks, but still made it to the final bell.
He just destroyed the left leg of Anthony Pettis.
He even survived having the submission wizard Charles Oliveira on his back. I mean, Pettis was always good at getting out of these tight spots. Unbelievably, 11 fights into his UFC career, and after fighting a bunch of dangerous guys, we'd never seen Pettis finished. But then he went up against Max Holloway. It was for an interim featherweight title, and Anthony had clearly drained himself to make that weight class. It was a competitive fight at first, but Holloway hit him with more strikes than anyone had in his entire career so far, and eventually it was just too much, and he melted Anthony against the cage, being the first man to ever stop Showtime.
Holloway looking to finish it. It is all over! Wow.
Number 7, Wonderboy Thompson versus Anthony Pettis. I've watched and trained a fair bit of kickboxing at this point, and
MMA! Yeah!
And although MMA might seem more brutal with ground and pound and more tools to use, he's alright. I'd argue that in a lot of cases, kickboxing might be the tougher sport. Alright, now I might get some hate for that.
This is #1 bullshit.
But more often than not, kickboxing comes down to the fact who can take the most punishment and keep moving forward. And the fact that Wonderboy Thompson went 57-0 as a kickboxer before switching to MMA is not only super impressive, but should also tell you he's not a guy you could put away easily. Obviously he's hard to hit, but he's proved time and time again he has a hell of a chin on him.
Boom! Oh!
There it is again. This is going to be over.
Wonder Man just don't sound right. Wonderboy is it.
Even in his first loss against Matt Brown, he was trying to finish him with those elbows, and he managed to make it to the final bell. I mean, that guy's KO'd everybody. If you saw him fight for the title against Tyron Woodley, you'll know he also survived that massive right hand that had knocked half the division unconscious, and then he even survived the follow-up submission attempts after. For a massive portion of Wonderboy's kickboxing and MMA career, he went through the whole thing without ever getting finished. But then the UFC booked him against Anthony Pettis in a good old traditional martial arts showdown. Anthony was going up a weight class, but after 2 rounds of back and forth action, it looked like Thompson's reach and precision was going to make the difference. But Showtime completely surprised Wonderboy, leaping off the cage and being the first guy and only guy ever so far to knock out Wonderboy Thompson after tons of elite competition in MMA and his entire kickboxing career.
I don't mind seeing that. What really hurts me is this one right here. Here it goes. He crushes my face. I was dead immediately.
Number 6, Chris Leben versus Anderson Silva. Season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter miraculously saved the UFC from dissolving into nothing, with thousands tuning in to watch the finale between Bonner and Griffin. But if you ask me, the real star of Season 1, especially as the show was airing, was Chris Leben. I mean, he brought chaos into that house with his personality, and then after the show ended, we all got to see that the guy, well, he could actually fight as well. For anyone who had seen Leben fight at that point, they probably knew about his chin because of his WEC fight with Mike Swick.
Now, Swick. Oh, now he lands a left-right combination. Oh, Leben knocks him with the left. Swick, it looked like he was going to get the advantage, and then he just ate that left hand. Wow.
And he replicated that time and time again in his UFC career. He just went to war with Patrick Cote, and then Jorge Rivera did the same thing as Mike, thinking he had Chris hurt, and then he just got slept by him. It seemed like a mistake to even believe that this man could go unconscious. It was only when that new guy, Anderson Silva or something, came over to make his UFC debut. It was incredible watching this Muay Thai master stalk him down and snipe him out and completely crush an indestructible bloke with one knee. Even Leben has said said that was the hardest shot he was hit with in his whole career, and the Spider was the first guy to finish him.
Bam, bam, and that is the end.
Number 5, Justin Gaethje versus Eddie Alvarez.
Justin the Highlight Gaethje!
He's described his early fight style in a lot of ways, but I think constantly redlining his engine is the best one.
You know that with Gaethje, he just comes, he knows one speed, full speed.
And that meant on multiple occasions, he was walking into the fire against his opponents and frequently taking the kind of shots that would probably knock a normal person out, probably knock out an elephant, to be honest, and he was just eating them. I mean, Justin slugged it out with everyone he fought and always came out on top in the World Series of Fighting, and then when he arrived in the UFC, he immediately did the same thing against Michael Johnson.
A few moments later.
Johnson survived! That's it! He cannot!
Now, a typical Gaethje fight felt like it could go either way at any moment, but somehow he always came out the winner. Unfortunately though, after that, he went up against Eddie Alvarez. Eddie cut him down to the body and ripped him with combos until the unstoppable, marauding version of Justin Gaethje was finally halted in its tracks. Number 4, Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje. I think every MMA fan has massively enjoyed watching the epic win streak of Tony Ferguson. Not just because he was doing some crazy Ninja Turtle shit outside the cage.
So which one's your favorite? I like Michelangelo.
Hold on, I'm talking, brother.
Or that he was sometimes dancing, sometimes throwing, spinning elbows, but because Tony fought at maximum pace, never letting off the accelerator, and essentially turning an MMA fight into a nightmare for everyone. But along with that kind of a style came a lot of risk, but it also became immediately apparent that along with everything else Tony had going for him, he also was an absolute zombie inside the cage. Now hold on, before you start saying anything, yes, technically I'm breaking my own rule. Okay, Tony was sub 2 minutes into the 9th fight of his career, but just for once, I don't care. Look, come at me. That was a different version of El Kukui. The point I'm trying to make is, this guy looks like the definition of an unfinishable fighter. Amidst his epic run, he had many fights where he was just dropped out stone cold. It looked like it was over. Michael Johnson dropped him, Abel Trujillo, Lando Venata, Anthony Pettis sent him wobbling around. Every time you thought the fight was over, Tony somehow Granby rolled his way back into it. Eventually though, he went up against Justin Gaethje in an empty arena, and across 5 rounds, took about 10 shots that would have put anybody else unconscious. Maybe, probably. I'm exaggerating, obviously. But there is that famous moment where Tony's literally shaking his head, trying to will away his brain's desire to switch off. And he didn't even go out. The ref just had to step in and wave it off.
Tony Ferguson is not a regular human. Most people would be unconscious at this point.
Now, Tony Ferguson may have been finished earlier on in his career, but El Kukui was finally stopped that night. Number 3, Diego Sanchez versus BJ Penn. No one really knew what to make of Diego Sanchez coming off the first season of The Ultimate Fighter. He was just kind of, absorbing lightning and doing kung fu, but also had incredible heart and toughness and amazing grappling. I'm not sure if carrying that crucifix to the cage actually imbued his chin with some kind of holy resistance, but goddamn, so many people tried to knock him out and just nobody could. It wasn't even that though. Diego tangled with some of the nastiest grapplers and no one could submit him there. Talking guys like Carl Parisian, Nick Diaz, even Joe Daddy Stevenson had a go. If you want to talk about the toughness of Diego Sanchez, I don't think you need to look any further than the Clay Guida fight. I mean, that is the epitome of fight of the night. Those two traded punches and Diego was getting rocked, but refused to do anything but just fire back.
Wow! What a fight!
However, it was that win that got him a shot against BJ Penn for the title. For 5 rounds, BJ chased Diego around the cage, landing pretty much whatever he wanted. He absolutely put a beating on Sanchez. But it wasn't until he opened up a massive cut that he forced a doctor's stoppage, because even then Diego wouldn't quit. That was, though, the first time ever Diego Sanchez was stopped. He wouldn't be knocked out, though, for another 7 years when he went up against Joe Lozon at UFC 200. Number 2, Frankie Edgar versus Brian Ortega. If you aren't aware, Frankie Edgar's nickname is The Answer, and you don't get that for any random reason. You get it because you can never count the guy out. He'd been knocked down and recovered more times than anyone, and even though by 2018 he was going up against Brian Ortega, he'd lost his UFC title and a few bouts, but no one had ever been able to finish the guy. Even in his UFC debut, it looked like he was going to get his knee ripped apart in the closing seconds, but he made it through.
Oh, I'm tapping and I'm not even in there!
He had those wars with Gray Maynard for the lightweight title. He was dropped so many times but still wasn't finished. But after that 32 fights, Frankie had been beaten a few times but never finished. But as fate would have it, when he missed out on his featherweight title opportunity against Max Holloway, he went up against a guy who had only ever finished people. It was one of those something's gotta give moments. Everyone was talking about the submission defense versus the offense, but when it came down to it in the end, Brian landed a sweet uppercut and knocked him out inside the first round. Number 1, Antonio Rogerio Nogueira versus Frank Mir. After taking on basically every single heavyweight legend in Pride, most people thought Big Nog was virtually unkillable. He had been in the ring with some of the baddest men to ever walk the earth, and absolutely no one was able to finish him. That includes, of course, that absolute spectacle when he took on the giant Bob Sapp and got pile-drived into the planet, enduring some of perhaps the most devastating ground and pound of all time against the GOAT Fedor, and eating a flush head kick from Cro Cop only to survive through the rest of the fight. Big Nog always put it all on the line. Coming into the UFC from Pride, he went on a win streak and then went up against Frank Mir for the interim title. Two of the baddest heavyweight submission artists going head to head. Who was going to tap who? It was all anyone could talk about. But Mir came out there with so much confidence in his boxing. He knocked him down twice in the first round, and that made it 7 knockdowns in Big Nog's career, but no one had knocked him out. But after another knockdown in the second round, the ref had no choice but to wave it off. Just 2 fights after that, we saw Big Nog go unconscious for the first time when he went up against the bulldozing Cain Velasquez. Still, he survived some of the most devastating shots of all time, so credit where credit's due, the legends at number 1. Right, okay, everybody, thank you very much for watching this one today. A whole bunch of fighters there you probably didn't know were a bunch of hard bastards and couldn't be finished until they were. I thought this was a good idea. I hope you enjoyed it. Shout out to all the Hall of Famers as well. Thank you, Hall of Famers. We appreciate you supporting the channel. If you want to join them, guys, you can click the button down below or the link in the description. Being a Hall of Famer is very fun. Lots of cool benefits. We've recently changed the price now as well, so you can get access to podcast episodes. A whole bunch of good stuff there for you. Who do you think was the hardest out of all this lot then? Who do you think couldn't be finished? Or maybe I have missed someone out. I don't think I have. I probably have though. You can let me know in the comments down below, guys. Thank you very much for watching this one. I've been Bailey and hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.